So let's get to our big interview for the day. As I said earlier, we really try to bring newsmakers in and just have this format where we can ask them questions and just let them answer freely and as sort of long as they want to as well. And I think it helps give a lot of context to some of the things that they're doing and holds them accountable as well. So joining me now is St. Paul Police Chief Axel Henry. We really appreciate you being here today.
Oh, we appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate the lead-in because a win for the Wilds is a win for St. Paul.
I was going to say, you didn't get to see the game, but
I did not, but they're our home team. They're, I know it says Minnesota Wild, but they live and play in St. Paul, so
all right.
We appreciate it.
I may ask you later to weigh in on what you think the X should be named, because they're going to have to rename the X.
I know.
I
like it being called the X.
I do too. I don't know that we're ever going to get over that hump of not calling it the X. So let's start. You became chief in 2022. For those of you who may not be familiar with your background, but you've been serving St. Paul now for more than 20 years in different capacities. So this is not your first rodeo. But I'm curious, as chief in this last couple of years, what has that been like for you from that perspective, which is really unique?
Yeah, so I became the chief at the end of November of 2022, so 23 was actually my first year. It's been really busy. There's a lot of things going on. But it's a real honor to serve a department like ours. We have such a rich tradition of great leaders, not just at the chief rank, but all the way down, that it puts a lot of pressure on you. I actually have had conversations with former chiefs about the fact that we have a responsibility to keep building on this legacy and this tradition of excellence. And so there's a little bit of it where it's like the analogy that sometimes is used is it's like laying a layer of bricks. Yeah. And if you lay them crooked or wrong or off, it's going to mess up the entire generations for the future. And that can put some pressure on you. But it's something I'm very flattered and honored to be selected to do. And we have such a great department with great people that they make it easier.
Yeah. Do people still, do they ever call you Chief Axel ever?
Happens all the time. I mean, his last name was very close to my first name. And it's funny, when I first came on, his nickname was Axe. My nickname has been Axe since I was a little kid. Yeah. And some people were saying, and I'm a lot physically taller and bigger than he is, and people were saying, well, we'll call you Big Axe, and people would say, well, you can't, he's been here longer, so he has to be, so everyone was like, well, he's not Small Axe because he's a lot taller. But yeah, that happens all the time. Yeah. Hopefully he doesn't mind it, I don't, so it is what it is.
It's a smoother transition, I guess, on the name when you don't have to relearn so much. But bigger picture now, let's kind of talk about, we talk a lot about Minneapolis. There's been a lot that's happened there. Eyes of the nation, eyes of the world have been on Minneapolis now for several years. So we don't get to talk as much about St. Paul. So bigger picture, overall crime picture, give us a sense of where you're at on some of these, especially like the major crimes.
So, I mean, the big scary categories that most of your viewers will probably care the most about, like from carjacking to homicide to people being shot with firearms, those types of things, they're all going down. It's very common to hear me say that we don't in-zone dance on those numbers, because even if we got the murder number down to where it is right now and it stayed here for the rest of the year, there's still some people in our community that have lost loved ones. So I don't think they'd appreciate the chief being happy about those numbers, but we're obviously really happy with the trends. We saw a big increase in crimes actually pre-COVID. I think a lot of people would attribute that to COVID, but they went up in 2018 and 2019 to levels that we hadn't seen, and then they stayed up. They're now reducing multiple years in a row, which is good. I always tell people, it's kind of like if you gain 100 pounds, and you know you have to lose it, then you lose 30 and everyone celebrates and you're still 70 pounds overweight. Oh, yeah. So we are losing, we're reducing in the areas we want to reduce over and over again. And I think it's a real testament to our workforce that does a great job, but also our community relationships and how we've connected folks in ways that we're all addressing the problem together. Police departments, contrary to popular belief, don't make communities safe. They're a part of the community, and it's the community that makes it safe. Yeah. And we have to operate in concert with one another for that to be successful.
Would you say that's the game changer for you guys, is the community relationships, or is that really the one thing that's kind of driving the I don't want to say success, but driving the numbers down?
Yeah. I wouldn't call it a game changer simply because those relationships have been built over decades. So it isn't like Axel Henry comes in and that starts. Sure. But it is the secret sauce, I would say, to what the things that we do well. And I think it's also the place you can point to almost every time when something falls apart. You can look and say, if we engaged our community sooner on that, or we gotten their advice or their opinion, or in many places you see in the country, they'll start a new program intended to build connection and create connection, and they don't include folks on the front end of it, and so it ends up actually backfiring. And so we're very big on building the community into that part of everything we do, because we're not the police department, we're your police department. And so you should have a say as to why we do things and how we do them so that we can work better together.
What are the biggest obstacles for you then in getting to lowering crime numbers and making public safety safer?
Well, it's an obstacle, but it's also an opportunity, is that St. Paul has got wonderful community, great businesses, great individuals, very generous people that care and they want to contribute. And so it's the obstacle, but it's the opportunity in that making the connections, getting folks connected. And sometimes that's not, you need to be connected to the police department, it's getting this business or this organization connected with this group, and we just stand back and allow that to happen. But the police department, and particularly the chief job, is so connected and in touch with all these at certain tables that sometimes my job is to simply say, I'm probably not the right person to be at this table. We should get those folks over here at the table, and let's solve that problem together. Because if we can prevent crimes, that's always way, way better than solving.
Yeah. Can I ask you about a couple of neighborhoods specifically? As you're talking about businesses and things, I guess, the Lower Town area pops in my head. People look at that and they say, well, gosh, businesses are leaving, and we see all these headlines with the restaurants leaving. Crime must be an issue there. What would you say to folks kind of looking in from the outside for that sort of more downtown area?
Well, I think it's important that statistically, by the data, we can show you that a lot of these neighborhoods are a lot safer than the perception sometimes is. And sometimes that's created just by the way a neighborhood looks, or maybe a recent event that's occurred, that kind of thing. But it's really true, especially for the downtown area and Lower Town. When we fill those spaces and use them the way they're supposed to be, in the sense that you're going to those restaurants, you're attending a show, or you're out walking your dog, or those kinds of things, that actually drives down crime. And that's why we're so happy to have the Minnesota Wild in our city, because when we have events like whether it's the high school wrestling tournament or the hockey tournaments or Wild games, crime goes down. We fill the spaces with activity, and people don't, that's good for neighborhoods. And so we want to make sure that we're a great host, and we fill those spaces so that not only are we a thriving city that people want to come to for really good reasons, but it actually does help with public safety.
So when there are events and it's busy, obviously, or maybe not obviously, but it seems like you would try to match, in staffing, you would try to match that proportionately. What about when there aren't things going on, and just sort of every day, if people wanted to go to dinner, down by CHS Field or something like that, what sort of staffing levels are happening, and do you feel comfortable with where you guys are at with that?
I do. So we have a shortage, not as bad as Minneapolis, but we're down about 18%. We're working on those numbers, where I'm very proud of the work that's being done around that. But what we haven't done, and that's been a conversation that's come out in the news a little bit from our city council about the overtime budget, is we have minimums. So we would never staff a certain part of the city or a certain shift, time of day, below a certain number. And so we're committed to that, and that's created obviously an expense, because once you get to a certain part below your authorized strength, you're paying $1.50 for $1 worth of labor. We're paying time and a half for that. So it does become expensive, but we're committed that our staff shortage should not result in you having a lower 911 response or a slower 911 response because of that staff shortage. So we're buying back the shortage of labor through overtime. But we're confident we can start to get those numbers up. That's a frustration point in a job like mine, is that those things don't happen overnight, but they are moving in the right direction, and we're hopeful that with those efforts, that those will be resolved. But we can't visit those shortages on the community that relies on us for protection.
I'm going to ask you about recruiting here in just a second. If I could just hit on, so Payne Phelan was in the headlines just the other day. If I could ask you about that neighborhood, and then also Hamlin Midway seems like a very sort of complicated area with some very interesting challenges there. If you could hit on those two neighborhoods for folks.
Yeah, the Payne Phelan neighborhood is it's where I spent most of my career. Love it. Yeah. It's a great place. I think that's a good example of one of the neighborhoods where when an event happens, I think it kind of paints the neighborhood with the event, when that really is more of an anomalous thing. There are, if I'm being honest, there is no really, really bad neighborhoods in St. Paul. There are some properties or addresses or conditions that contribute to neighborhoods feeling worse or being worse, but by national standards, we don't have a neighborhood that people would be like, you can't go down there at night. And what we're seeing is some of the things that I think we as a city, and we try to operate as an enterprise in the city, so it's not just a police problem, this is a PED problem and a public works problem and a Parks and Rec problem. Is what we're seeing is, as some of these changes happen, we're seeing this definitely downtown and for sure in the Midway area, some of the businesses are closing up. And the time lag between when that happens and when the new development happens, those spaces are kind of like potholes. They fill in.
It's okay. I don't know what that is. Sorry.
Someone likes my answer.
We've got a caller. Go ahead on line 3 for the chief. I'm not sure what that is.
Maybe that's my mayor calling me saying, stop talking about that. I'm not sure.
Somebody's trying to. Nikki, would you mind just seeing if we can just unplug that, or it's something from in our conference room.
There was a phone that was going to go off by accident. I would have expected it to be mine. That's why I left it in the car.
I looked, did I leave my phone on? Yeah, thank you. You didn't know you were going to be troubleshooting that today. All right, thank you, Nikki.
But I guess my point is that what we have to do is make sure that we're very intentional and strategic and long-term thinking. As the businesses close and they're boarded up and that kind of thing, it sends a message to the community that we're not paying attention, or that doesn't matter, or it's not something we care about. And so what really happens, and that's really why flooding places like downtown, when the Minnesota Wild play or something else, it looks like people care and people want to be there and those types of things. So we have to be cognizant of the fact that you don't fix that by posting a police officer out there. You fix that by making sure that it stays well maintained and that you communicate a vision to your city that, hey, you might see that building is closed right now. Like, you could imagine if a business caught on fire and it was boarded up and it looks covered with soot. That's okay for a couple weeks, everyone understands that, but if you allow that to stay there forever, at some point it feels like no one cares about this neighborhood. Yeah. And if people don't care about it, the rest of the people care about it a little less, and folks that maybe aren't invested in your neighborhood will spend time there because they figure no one cares.
Okay, I do want to talk about some of the recruiting efforts. It sounds like, is this sort of a newish campaign you're putting together, or the videos that you've put together, is that something that is sort of new, or?
Yeah, a little bit. So, I mean, obviously recruiting is always important for every administration of the chief. When I became the chief, I wanted us to, it's kind of a cliche for me to go out and say, hey, join the police department. People are going to say, well, of course you say that, you're the chief of police. But what I wanted people to know was what's lying behind all that is our community really does support our police department. And they want good officers here. And they want us to be fully staffed. They want to see our squad cars going up and down their streets.
We're taking a look at here. If you want to kind of walk us through what we're seeing. Obviously, this is you giving a pitch, maybe giving a.
But mine's the least important voice in there. So what you'll see as a later video comes on, and hopefully at some point it can broadcast with the audio, is it's community leaders, and we have a whole series of them that come forth and saying join us. So it isn't just the chief of police saying join the police department. It's the owner of the Minnesota Wild, or it's the president of the NAACP, or it's a council member, or our mayor. Who's saying, listen, join us. It isn't just the police chief or the police department that wants you to join. It's the entire city. We're a part of the community. We're not outside of that community.
Do we have an opportunity to bring up some audio on that really quick, guys? Or
it's not only our top priority, but we work together to eliminate barriers.
It's important for all of us to come together to make sure that our community is safe.
Public safety is so important to our business leaders, to our community leaders. We invite you to make a difference and to be part of our community.
Please, would you consider joining us?
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
Join us.
And how competitive is it, to be able to become? I think we've seen, and I know when I think of St. Paul and I think of the PD and the stories we've covered, it seems to me that there's been an initiative for diversity, to be able to have people reflected in the communities that they're serving, that kind of thing. Talk to me a little bit about the types of people who are coming on board with you.
Well, they're really from across the strata. So we have great programs to onboard folks that are actually born and raised from our city. Some of them are the first people in their families that have ever had a college degree, those types of things. As well as we have people in their 40s who are doing career-changing opportunities, those types of things. But as I had mentioned earlier about every chief has a responsibility to build on that legacy. When I came here in the 90s, Chief Bill Finney was our chief of police. And his motto or saying at the time was to be reflective of and responsive to your community. And I would tell people when I became the chief, I said, think about that. That's a phrase he said in the 90s. That's the police department I was a part of. That sounds like something a former chief in the 2022 or 23 would have came up with. And that's the police department that I joined. And every chief since then has tried to build on that. So that's the type of rich tradition that I'm talking about that we have to live up to. We hold ourselves to very, very high standards here, and our employees strive to meet that all the time.
What made you want to get into law enforcement?
Well, it's funny, someone had just asked me about that the other day. I walked out of high school in 1987, St. Paul Central grad, St. Paul kid, born and raised, and I didn't want to be a police officer. I didn't dislike the police. It was just not something that I thought of. And through a long story, which I won't bother anybody with, I ended up looking into this. And what I figured out in my 30s was I was being called to a sense of purpose. I wanted to serve in some way. I imagine how maybe people at a younger age, I didn't feel this way, I maybe wasn't mature enough yet, but in their 18s, 19s, and 20s joined the military. I wanted to be a part of something bigger. I just didn't know that's what it was at the time. And I got drawn to the law enforcement, the service light through that. And it wasn't until after I did it and really was enjoying doing it that I realized, oh, that's what happened. That I wanted to serve. I wanted to be a part of something that was bigger than myself. I had graduated from the University of St. Thomas with a business degree in business administration and accounting. And I got out and I had paid for that degree working for the St. Paul Parks and Rec. I had a commercial license and I drove and I was a laborer. And when I got out, I realized I want to have something I have to use my body and my brain for. And someone had recommended I do a ride along with me, and I got caught the bug, and I started it. But really, I figured out after I got the job what had drawn me to it. It was that service element.
Did you think at the time, I want to be chief someday? Or did you say, let's just see where this takes me?
Oh, no, I never had any desire to be the chief. I never really wanted to get promoted. The good news is the job you get when you start law enforcement, the patrol job, which you are going to start your career in if you join a municipal police department, is the best job. It's the funnest. It's the most rewarding. It's the most exciting. All the parts that you would want out of a job are that. And then later in your career, your peers will ask you to, well, people have to promote for different reasons. You have to, sometimes there's a need to go up the ladder. And so I did those things. And then it was very late in my career where I was approached by a number of other commanders. I was a commander at the time that said, would you ever consider putting in for this? And I hadn't really thought about that. But I obviously really like leadership stuff. I had done some things earlier in my, previously in my career that kind of led to that. And so I kind of got the encouragement from a bunch of my peers. And so I thought, well, I'll do it. I'll try it. But it's a big responsibility, and I'm very flattered and honored that I was selected for it. But it wasn't something that my career was set out to do.
Is there such thing as work-life balance for you in a position like this? Do you find it? Do you look for it, or do you just kind of go, well, this is the job?
It's kind of what it is. It kind of is what it is. I've always been kind of a workaholic, and I'm kind of tied to my phone. I've had assignments in my career that that's just how I'm wired. My partner is very understanding about it. She also has a really demanding job. There are times where I'm actually scolding her about put her phone down. So it isn't like it's, we try to find that balance together. I think that the both of us are running away from the polarities of our jobs to try to find some space over here. But yeah, we work at it. And I have a great workforce, and I'm surrounded by a great team who's on me to take time away or shield me from stuff when they can. So yeah. What
do you do when you're not doing this? Or what do you enjoy doing?
I like being outside. I like working out. I'm big into music, so I like a lot of that stuff. I like unplugging.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, for me, is the big thing. I mean, I would be lying if I didn't say I didn't like the pace and the chaos of, I imagine you probably deal with that too, being in the news. Yeah. There's an adrenaline thing that goes with that. So when I'm away from it, I just try to detach from it as much as I can.
For sure. All right. We really appreciate your time today. We appreciate your willingness to come in here. It's live, and as we talked about, it can be, you never know what's going to happen or what's going to be asked or yeah, exactly. You never know who's going to interrupt. So we appreciate the willingness to come on and answer whatever questions we have for you. So thank you for your time, and we hope we can bring you back in on a regular basis.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks, Chief.
Thanks so much.
Appreciate you very much. All right. Okay, let's take a break. Do you want to take a break, Amber, and come on back? Yep, I hear some break music. Let's do it. All right, more headlines when we come back. Lauren's going to talk about some construction projects in greater Minnesota that you might want to know about. And of course, we're going to talk more about the Wild too. So All Day Live continues right after this.